My name is Lily Wicks and I'm the Professional Services Manager at LifeStart. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. It's my first time presenting for a virtual conference, so I'm excited to share this information with you using this technology. Part of my role at LifeStart over the last 4 years has been developing the systems and processes around student placements. I currently coordinate student placements across our programs and around 15 offices that we currently have. This also involves approximately 250 LifeStart staff and providing support for them when they're supervising students. So before we get started with the webinar, I'll just give you a little bit of information about LifeStart, the organisation that I work for and represent in this webinar. So LifeStart provides early childhood intervention and inclusion support for children and young people, so in the 0 to 24 years range, and these children and young people are living with disability or a developmental delay. We also support their families, carers and other people within the community who may be supporting the individual. And we provide this support in select regions of metropolitan Sydney. LifeStart is an ECEI partner in some regions of metropolitan Sydney, in the Illawarra and Shoalhaven and Central Coast regions. We currently employ approximately 250 staff members, and it's interesting to note that 7 of the current staff members at LifeStart have in the past completed a student placement at LifeStart. And you can find more about LifeStart at our website, so www.lifestart.org.au. So just to run over a few things that we'll discuss in the webinar today, we're looking to provide a bit more information on why you might consider students and placements within your workplace, what students tell us they enjoy and what they think is important or important parts of placements, how you best support student supervisors or people that might be interested or don't know that they're interested, but you might be wanting to encourage to provide some support to students. We'll also run over some of the benefits and challenges for organisations, and we'll provide you with some tips who are currently, if you're hosting students or thinking about students, some things to consider. We'll finish off with some resources that you may or may not be aware of that are freely available to support organisations, supervisors and students alike. So when we answer the question why you might consider student placements, I thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about a student placement survey that LifeStart has been routinely sending to students over the past 4 years. So really our student placement programs before 2014 were probably more on an individual basis. So the university, TAFE or college had local contacts with particular staff members, perhaps they were previous students, and they might ring that particular staff member and ask if they would consider supervising. Myself, when I was in a direct work role, that was pretty much how my student supervision experience started, was getting a call from the university to see if I would consider taking a student. And things were probably managed in a little bit more of an individual basis, so we didn't really have a lot of systems in place to manage flow of students, to manage how we might provide support to students and supervisors, and how we might better work with the unis, TAFEs and colleges that are coming and asking for student placements. So my role was to develop some of those systems and to start to build some relationships with tertiary education providers, which we have been doing over the last 4 years. So in the time since 2014 to current, we've had about 99 students respond to our student placement survey. And some of the interesting results would lead you to think that student placements do have the potential to contribute greatly to the workforce and the future workforce. So when we asked students to make a comment on their experience before a placement within the disability sector, 39% were already considering a job there or had an interest in that area. But after their placement, that 84% said that they would work in the disability sector. And even if they didn't necessarily have the disability sector marked as their first preference, 92% reported that they actually felt that they would be confident to seek or work in this area. So you can see there's a couple of quotes below there that lets you know that students perhaps don't necessarily have enough information about what work is like in the disability sector to make an informed decision about where their work may lie after graduation. And we do have the potential to influence them if we give them the right opportunities whilst they're studying here. I think the quote down below was particularly telling that, this person said they didn't have any desire to work in the disability sector. But after their experience, it was definitely their ideas and thoughts about what the disability sector looked like had been challenged, and they noticed that it was different. So if there was an opportunity that came up, they thought they would definitely take it. And we've also, it's certainly an interest of mine has been to try and sort of work out what it is that students feel they value in a placement so that we can support supervisors around a student experience. But equally, we can support students to better understand the needs of supervisors and what the challenges that might be presented when we come into a real life, real work environment. So part of my role is to really be an intermediary between students and supervisors, providing support for both, but helping both groups to best understand the needs of each other and how they can best work together. So in terms of asking the students about what they value, the survey did ask them to rate or rank some of the experiences that they've had. And the values that are listed here are in order of which experience was most highly rated. So when we talk about interdisciplinary supervision, we're really talking about students having access to lots of people within the workplace who come from a different professional or work background, and being able to join them and observe or interact with them whilst they're in their work. So, definitely traditionally, and LifeStart employs quite a lot of people from allied health backgrounds. Traditionally, placements didn't always provide an opportunity for students to meet with and speak to people in different roles. So students definitely said that this was something that made the difference for them within the disability sector. It gave them an experience of working in a team, and also best understanding what skills other team members have and how they might be able to work together to learn more and to be able to impact or provide a better experience for the people that they're supporting. The second thing that students said that they really highly valued about being on placement was having the opportunity to work with students who are studying something different to them. So a lot of work's been done in the sector in the last 3 to 4 years around what we call interdisciplinary work, or students being on placement who essentially are their own small interdisciplinary team. Now, logistically, sometimes this can be difficult to manage, and often at LifeStart, what's happened is we've tried hard for this to happen, and sometimes it's happened kind of just by chance or coincidence, and we've taken advantage of that. So we do work with quite a number of universities, TAFEs and colleges, so sometimes conflicting schedules means that our planning can't be as strategic as what we would like, but we have had a number of instances where we've really tried to work students together who may be studying in allied health, they may be in education, they may be in certificate courses through TAFE or private colleges. So say, for example, students who are studying through social work or psychology. So the students they may not have necessarily been in the same office, but they have come together to work on particular projects, and those projects have really focused on them needing to work together and understand their own practice areas and understand their role in contributing to the team. So for some students, this is a little bit more different, a different experience and sort of adds on to the opportunities they get to demonstrate skills. So particular skills that sit within their discipline or practice area that they must demonstrate or show competency in. But this also, the experience with other students helps them to see that beyond competency, there are additional soft skills that would support them to gain employment in the disability sector or any workplace really. So those skills around negotiation, teamwork, and when and where to approach and how to best utilise the skills that you have around you for a better outcome. The third thing that people talked about really valuing was paired placements. So in particular, we're talking about a placement where two or more students come from the same university or course that are on placement together, and they are typically either in the same kind of office or region, so they see each other semi-regularly. That doesn't mean that they're always together. It may mean that they are a little bit like colleagues on a team, so they might see themselves back at the office or spend time together, brainstorming, working on plans. but they may be supervised by the same supervisor, or they may be supervised by different supervisors within the same office. Really, we've had to be very flexible in organising how supervision will look, because staff are incredibly busy. Things have been changing in the sector, and particularly in the last couple of years with the introduction of the NDIS, there has been lots of consideration about how supervision works for not only students, but for supervisors who are carrying a lot of load and a lot of change. Beyond some of the models that we've talked about on the slide, students also made comments frequently that things that they valued was feeling part of a team, feeling as though they're welcome in offices, they have a role within meetings, people know who they are and they understand their purpose, and then also having some clear opportunities to interact with different team members and learn more about their roles. Students also commented frequently that they enjoyed different ways of working with people, so having opportunity to work with people in their homes, communities, schools, workplace, early childhood settings, and really seeing some of the models that they probably have a theoretical understanding about, or they might hear about at uni, being brought to life in the workplace. So they're also some of the opportunities, and they're unique opportunities that students tell us they're not going to gain experience in other sectors. Okay, so that's a little bit about students, and students are always really happy to give you feedback and, certainly give you some very good ideas and suggestions around what they like and what they don't like. In terms of the student supervisor feedback, they did recognise that there are opportunities to develop their skills and confidence. Because they are supervising future colleagues. And, sometimes when we've talked to staff members about starting their supervision journey, we've also talked about what opportunities they have to develop skills that could potentially support them to further their career or be put forward for future roles. So, in terms of developing their skills in supervision, they can also be considering what it would be like to be in a leadership role within their team that involves supervision of colleagues. And it may also involve really stepping outside service delivery and thinking about how it works and what skills and what systems that you need. So the people that do really well in student supervision are people that have an understanding of systems and have an interest in others and have an interest in the development of the sector, but then also have quite good skills themselves. So often student supervisors, when you would approach a student supervisor, they don't have to actually be the most experienced person in the organisation. They just need to be someone who's willing to give things a try, that has some good systems around how they manage their workload and how they interact with families and individuals with disability. So they need to be someone that you feel has solid skills, but to be honest, we've had lots of student supervisors who don't have a lot of experience but have a lot of energy and interest in the student, and with some support can provide really valuable experiences. And I guess my experience is if people don't get started, then it just becomes harder as they move through their career to see an opportunity and take advantage of that. Student supervisors also said, that they have great opportunities and they see value in supporting the disability sector to attract future employees and future colleagues. So current staff really want to see people who have had experience and have the right mindset and the right idea around supports for people with a disability when they come into the workplace. So often our teams have been really supportive when new graduates have come through our competitive recruitment process. So all students would need to go through that recruitment process if they were looking for a job at LifeStart. But they actually feel that the new graduate comes with a good understanding of the sector and a good understanding of some of the theories and how we work with people, despite the fact that they'll still need some support around their work and how they interact and what they need to do within their practice area. But our experience has been that staff are really welcoming of new graduates, particularly when they've had a prior experience within the disability sector. And they also recognise that it's great, students come with ideas, they come with logins to access additional resources, research that perhaps staff members don't always have access to. And they come with enthusiasm and questions and things that actually stimulate conversation and also assist staff to really think about what they're doing and be explaining some of the research and some of their critical thinking about how they work with families. student supervisors also mentioned, it is good when a few students come together because they can go off and work together. They come back with their ideas. And in some ways that creates some more efficiencies and less of that expectation that a student needs to be with their supervisor all day or have access to their supervisor throughout the day. In saying that, there are some things to really consider around staff supervisors, and in terms of the current situation within the disability sector, staff are really having to think about a lot, having to adapt and having to respond to changes, and some of them are really big changes and some of them are small everyday things that people need to get their head around. So we've really been very careful and mindful of some of the changes that are happening outside within the sector and things that happen within LifeStart that mean that staff have to draw their attention towards new systems, technologies, other projects, things that they're being asked to provide support on, as well as maintaining their own commitments to families and their productivity levels. So one of the big focuses we've had at LifeStart is around how do we actually create some efficiencies in training for supervisors. So we have created some online webinar recordings which really talk through some of the ideas and how you might support a student on placement and what resources are available for you. We've created some processes and some support documents to step supervisors through the process. So really from when a student makes contact to us and comes through our online form, we've tried very much to create the templates and processes so a lot of that pre-work happens at our head office level with our HR team and myself. And really the students and the supervisors come together once all those verifications and all those confirmations of placements and start dates have happened. So that process has been something that I've led, but I appreciate and I certainly need to be clear that it has taken a long time and a lot of effort and commitment from the organisation towards student placements to ensure that those processes exist, and they do create some efficiencies now, but there does need to be some time dedicated to putting those processes in place. So I would suggest, considering what processes you can develop, and also how do you look at minimising supervisor time, so organising placement activities and the day-to-day things that supervisors say are time outside of what is a billable activity that can support their productivity levels or benchmarks. The other thing that the tip that I would say is for supervisors, something that's come up particularly as we've had more and more students. So, over the past couple of years, we've had anywhere from 80 to 100 students coming through LifeStart. The more students that you attract, the more opportunity you have to see the spectrum of skills and needs that students may have. So there will be some students who come in and they adapt and they're working really hard. They're asking questions, they're making changes, responding to feedback, and there's really not a question of whether they're going to be successful in finishing their placement and completing those competencies. There will be some students who take a little bit longer to adapt, and really a student placement at LifeStart is quite different to a student placement that they may have had in other sectors. So it requires high level of organisation. There's lots of competing activities and deadlines and people that you talk to. It's a dynamic, fast-moving workplace that involves travel, so there's additional organisation that you need to have to call on and get everything finished on time. So some students are well equipped to manage that level of stress on top of what they are expected to do within the supports that we provide, and some students find that really challenging. Other students we find challenging in terms of what they understand or whether they can actually meet our expectation of a minimum standard of competency. And one of the things that we've been really focused on is being really proactive in gaining support from universities, TAFEs and colleges early in a placement if we feel that a student for whatever reason is not meeting an expectation, whether that be from what they understand or their theoretical understanding or some of the skills that they need to have from day one really around interacting in the workplace. So some of those processes can be quite involved in order to support the student to make changes or provide additional supports. but they do, in my experience, create lots of additional time spent by supervisors, by myself, by contacts from the universities or TAFEs or colleges, to really best map out support for that particular student. So we need to, be proactive to ensure that everybody gets the best opportunity to develop and grow. All right, so we've talked a lot about, the benefit to the sector, and that's absolutely undeniable. There's been benefits from our organisation as well. So we have benefited from previous students applying for jobs, being successful in that recruitment process, and staying with LifeStart and really making a positive contribution to our organisation. So that's within our organisation, but we can see that for the sector and future workforce, that the more opportunities that students have to experience work within the disability sector and to work with individuals and develop some new skills, not only benefits the disability sector, but really benefits the way that they would approach working with people with whatever work that they find themselves doing. And this in turn would benefit people living with disability and their families, because they're going to encounter a workforce of people that better understand the essence of what person-centered practice is, and come ready with some skills, but then also, have that underlying value that they'll take into any workplace. There's certainly within our organisation opportunities for staff to develop new skills, and really great skills that may help them to consider promotions, consider regrading, consider new opportunities for them, and things that they can really put on their skills passport or CV. We also, as I mentioned before, there's also the potential for recruiting skilled staff that absolutely still need experience, they need supervision, they need lots of support in their first year, but they don't necessarily need the amount of time and energy that is devoted towards really thinking about what their values are and how they work. So the potential for breakdown in a recruitment of a person who's had a placement, I think, is less, because they essentially do know what they're coming into and how we expect them to work. Some of the challenges. So it's always a balance here. There absolutely is undeniably additional time involved in supporting student placement programs. That time may be small pieces of time here and there, but at all levels of the organisation, if we think about a student coming on for a number of weeks, they do need to be considered like a staff member. So they go through HR processes, which takes time. They go through processes with their supervisor where they need to have access to their support and supervision. They need to have access to feedback. And this may diminish over the course of the placement, but there is absolutely a fixed time that needs to be devoted to supporting students, regardless of where they're at and regardless of how they're coping on placement. So those are fixed costs that we can't deny, and I guess one of the challenges is how do we promote the spending of this kind, or making this financial commitment, when there's there's organisations that need to be very focused on minimum levels of productivity in order to be able to maintain supports within the sector. That being said, there's other changes in the sector as well. So, day to day, week to week, it seems like there are new things, new information that we need to become familiar with, that often creates some more processes. So my understanding is at the moment that, staff have a lot on their plate in terms of what operationally might need to change very quickly for them. And there's also big changes in the sector with with organisations like LifeStart, who we are making some changes to the way that we provide support. So often there's a lot competing for staff time, attention, and if asked to prioritise, sometimes one of the challenges is that we can't prioritise new student placements or additional time in that area until we feel that things have settled in other areas. And so I guess that probably sums up in the last point there, the balance between supporting the current workforce and, the investment that we've made, and then providing opportunities, investing in the future workforce. Okay, so In terms of tips for organisations, and you've definitely, if you're listening to this webinar and you're thinking that's fantastic, we really need to invest in the future workforce, and we'd like to perhaps start small with some or students placements, or we'd like to better develop our program to try and encourage students into our organisation. There are a number of existing resources and systems within the sector, and I'll go through those in a couple of slides that are free to access, and definitely are resources that I wish had been around when we were developing our programs. They really would have supported me in having some things that you can quickly grab or refer people to rather than have to create things as you go along. Create some efficiencies in trying to manage some of the fixed time involved in student placement. So definitely it's made a big difference in our HR systems to have a very clear stepwise process that we work through, and having people that understand that process so that can be part of their day-to-day activities to manage this as an aside. Particularly around IT and verifications, obviously that absolutely needs to happen. And then also some efficiencies around managing supervision, so whether you can use some technology to link students with their supervisor, and whether you can support student supervisors to really manage that relationship with students. Because often, and I guess in any kind of teamwork or supervision or relationship that you have with a supervisor, it is a negotiation around how much is needed, and also how much you might be enjoying that interaction, how much you might be learning. So, it is it's good for students and supervisors to learn about what boundaries they might have on their time, and how they can best support students to be really efficient about the way they manage their supervision, and to be coming prepared to be thinking about that opportunity and to be doing the work between. And I guess that is something that develops with time, but it really has been something that has been highlighted perhaps in the last year, that students also need the education around how to best manage their interactions with a supervisor, because that will also support them in the workplace. I would recommend talking to staff, when you talk about student placements, not only to talk about the benefits for the sector, but talk about their own, what could be something that is an individual benefit for them. So, definitely I've been involved in recruitment for higher level positions within our organisation, and over, staff members looking to make that change or looking to be considered for that promotion have spoken about opportunities that they've had to support students, and what that's meant for their skills, and what that's meant for their ability to actually take on additional duties. So that's been really great that staff have realised that in doing this and committing and spending extra time, they are actually building their own skills and their portfolio and CV and things and also broadening their ideas about how their work could potentially look in the future. I would say consider what students can get involved in, and who will actually oversee this. So, students often, the sector will talk a little bit about, and when I say sector, I mean university, colleges and TAFEs, quite rightfully so, will suggest that students can get involved in projects, and students do come with some really fantastic skills. They also come with some access to resources and research that perhaps you don't have within your organisation. But you do need to spend a little bit of time actually thinking about what the project might look like, and having someone who can be a contact point for students. Be remembering that when students come into your organisation, they're like a new staff member. It's going to take them a little time to work out who's who and where you get information and what's appropriate and how do you manage a project. So they do come with the skills to find out the information, but they will need some support around how you actually manage your own project. And that does take a little bit of time. So if you do have someone within your organisation, perhaps potentially not the supervisor themselves, because they do have time and energy that they need to spend towards their other work activities, perhaps be proactive about those projects, and know and understand that students will need your ongoing support. Work closely with the tertiary education providers, and don't be afraid to give them some feedback, constructive, around what it could look like in your workplace, and what time you might have, and what might be potential barriers, because in those conversations they may be able to suggest something that you weren't aware of, or provide some additional supports, which means that you can actually provide that opportunity, or you can work towards that opportunity becoming available for students. So It's definitely the relationships that I've been able to develop with contacts within the sector have been really beneficial. And there has been some times where I've thought that perhaps something might not be possible, but we've worked together and been able to manage that. I'd say look at what might be manageable. Start out small. Certainly when we started, we went really big. We had a lot of relationships across universities. So we were managing students across really most universities in Sydney and into the Illawarra Shoalhaven. We were working with TAFEs and colleges. So my advice might be, if you're looking to think about time and something that might be manageable, perhaps just pick one particular provider or pick one particular course and really test the process and the systems, and check what sort of time it does take and what time you might have available and what will be the most value for money for you. So if you're an organisation that is looking to really support the employment of very skilled direct support workers, then you definitely would be looking at really honing that relationship with the local education provider that provides that opportunity for students. And you really want to work with them a lot about what work in your organisation looks like and the kind of skills, qualities and attributes you're looking for and what kind of support you might need to make this an ongoing relationship that's going to work. Okay, so I mentioned some resources that are around and available, freely available on the internet. So over the last, say, 3 to 4 years, there's been a couple of projects that I've been involved in that I'll speak to first. So definitely we've been able to have a strong partnership here at LifeStart with another department or within FACS, so now currently with the Benevolent Society. So the Specialist Placement and Recruitment Unit, which was formerly at FACS, has developed quite a number of resources for people in the sector. We've been a key partner in some of those resources, and they are still sitting, if you follow this link, they are listed on the website there, so you can go and have a look. I'll just point out a couple of things that we were involved with the SPA unit as a project lead. So we had some funding from the Health Education and Training Institute to develop some resources that help students and supervisors better understand what opportunities there are within the sector. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there, YY was a previous student here at LifeStart who then was successful in gaining employment within our offices and still working with LifeStart. And she spoke a little bit in her clip alongside 3 or 4 other students just about some of the things that she found really useful and things that she'd liked and things that she thinks are really great for students within the disability sector. All of those video clips of students talking about the opportunities they've had and how they've worked and what they've been able to do are linked on that website. So you can go through, and they're also, so they come through YouTube. So you can share them with staff, students. Certainly the universities, we were thinking that was something that they could use to help students better understand what opportunities there are. One of the other resources that you'll see on the bottom right-hand side is one of the set of resources that was developed by the Specialist Placement and Recruitment Unit staff in partnership with a number of providers, and LifeStart was one of those providers. And the great thing about this resource is that there are a couple of versions. There's an easy English version or an accessible version for people with a disability that really talks through how a student may work with them, and also addresses some issues around consent and provides the individual, their families and carers with just a little bit more information about opportunities that there may be if you're asked to work with a student, and also how you might consent to that or not consent. One of the other resources I'm really excited about, so LifeStart's been part of a bit wider group, so the Disability Workforce Education Reference Group, or DWERG, and this group brings together a large number of providers, or people that are interested in student placement, so people from the tertiary education sector, from TAFE, universities, people that are within policy, the NDIA, and other organisations that have some interest in the sector and how it's developed. So One of the projects that we've been working on within this group in partnership with NDP is to create an online hub of resources for students and supervisors. So essentially putting a lot of these resources in one place, which is easily accessible for people within the sector. So I've just included a couple of screen grabs. So I've included the link there. So if you go to that link, you can access all of these resources. And we've also put together or organised them just so that if you're, depending on your journey or what you're interested in, you might be directed to some resources that best suit your needs. So you can see here there's some that are directed at students, managers, first-time supervisors, or people that have perhaps been supervising a while. That particular hub is always being reviewed and updated, and there will be opportunities to provide feedback if there's something there that you think is missing or you would like to see more of in the future. The NDIA, I should also mention, does provide some support and documentation around student placements. There's a frequently asked question form that I believe is on their website, and that pretty much just drills more into some of the issues related to billing, activities and supports that need to be in place if you're going to allow for students to be involved in providing NDIA funded supports. But I would encourage you to have a look at that. It certainly has provided us with some good clarity around students and NDIS packages. That brings me to the end of the webinar today. I'll provide my contact details here, so if you have any questions related to this presentation or student placements in general, please feel free to contact me. Thanks again for joining me on this webinar. If you have any questions, please join the chat session after the session and post your comments or questions there. You can also contact me directly using the email that I provided on the slide.